600 participants, 399 men and 201 controls, ages ranging from 16 to 87, the American metaphor for racism in the medical field, a study far beyond ethical, a terrible experiment that wouldn't be the first of its kind, an experiment of untreated syphilis that would end up killing 421 African Americans, an event that would change the perspectives of many in the ethics of human experimentation. The Tuskegee experiment, running for 40 years, 1932 through 1972. It's an example of a huge violation of human rights, as it violated the rights of the participants to informed consent in healthcare. The study's purpose was to find out the effects of untreated syphilis in the African American men. This Tuskegee experiment, led by the U.S. Public Health Service in Macon County, Alabama, has shown the need for ethical reforms in medical experiments, especially those using humans as subjects, and serves as a long-lasting reminder of the rights of the people to equal protection underneath the law of the United States.
Syphilis, a sexually transmitted infection that without treatment can cause serious and life-threatening health problems, is divided into 4 stages: primary, secondary, latent, and tertiary. The primary stage symptoms are sores around where the disease has entered. Symptoms of secondary syphilis include rashes and sores. In the latent stage of syphilis, there are no symptoms, which can lead to syphilis being in one's body for years. The tertiary stage occurs when syphilis has been in your body for about 10 to 30 years. Most people with syphilis don't reach this stage, but it can lead to death if not treated. When the study began in the early 1930s, the treatment available consisted of mercury and 2 arsenic compounds. The drugs were highly toxic and often produced serious and occasionally fatal reactions in patients. As one CDC officer stated, the drugs offered more potential harm for the patient than potential benefit. Even after the invention of penicillin, those in charge of the experiment decided to continue the study and continue to keep the participants from treatment. The experiment went on as the Public Health Service, or PHS, argued that they might not have another chance for this study.
From 1891 through 1927, a Norwegian doctor, Caesar Boeck, hospitalized about 2,000 white patients with primary and secondary syphilis until lesions heal without treatment in Oslo, Norway. This was known as the Oslo Study and was the basis of the Tuskegee Study. In September 1932, the PHS proposed to study untreated latent syphilis in Macon County. Tuskegee Institute officials and the local and state health departments agreed to the study. In October 1932, the PHS study of untreated latent syphilis began in Macon County, Alabama. This study is projected to last 6 to 8 months and intended to be made up of black men from the ages ranging from 16 to 87. These people must have syphilis for at least 5 years, which is determined by onset of chancres, and must have positive blood tests for syphilis. All of the subjects must also have no treatment prior to the study. All subjects are put into therapy below the recommended amount. In 1933 of August, 28% of those tested were found to be syphilis positive. From September 1933 through March 1934, the PHS began choosing men to control the study.
The PHS investigation found no formal protocol for the experiment, later revealing that methods had simply evolved over time. The basic protocols required regular autopsies and blood tests. Researchers focused on men with late-stage syphilis to better understand the severe complications at the disease's final stage. Dr. J. W. Williams, an intern at Andrews Hospital in 1932, helped with the Tuskegee study's clinical work. He stated that neither the interns nor the participants knew the study's true purpose. The men were told they were being tested, but weren't informed about what they were being treated for. While he administered drugs he thought were for syphilis, he later speculated some might have been placebos. Charles Pollard recalled being approached in 1932 by men offering a free health checkup if he came to a nearby school. He said, "They told me I had bad blood, and they've been saying that ever since, checking on me and repeating, 'Charlie, you have bad blood.'" Dr. Reginald G. James and Eunice Rivers, a nurse who tracked Tuskegee study participants, focused on diagnosing and treating syphilis from 1939 to 1941. According to Dr. James, Rivers would inform him he's under study and not to be treated if he located a study participant. Dr. James was troubled by this and tried to cure the patients, but they never came back out of fear of being removed from the study and missing the benefits that were promised. Nurse Rivers, a Tuskegee resident, served as a liaison between the subjects and researchers, providing continuity as staff changed over the years. The men eventually learned they were part of a group called Miss Rivers' Lodge. They had no idea they were part of a dangerous study group. There were many instances of misconduct throughout the study, the largest one being the violation of the participants' right to informed consent. Those in charge of the study failed to inform the participants what they were being studied and allegedly treated for. They neglected to tell the participants that they had a life-threatening disease and let them walk around for years without that significant information. Instead of informing the men that they had late-stage syphilis, they simply told them they had bad blood. In front of the House Commerce Committee, Gary Ackerman, the congressional representative, said, "There was one point in our society, a very dark day, when people were allowed to walk around after being tested with a dread disease, just so the medical establishment could see what happens." This was allowed to go on for 40 years, finally ending in 1972. When the knowledge of this experiment became public, many were reminded of the horrors that had occurred in Nazi Germany. A man in Tennessee reminded health officials in Atlanta that Adolf Hitler allowed similar degradation of human dignity in inhumane medical experiments on humans living under the Third Reich, and confessed that he was much distressed at the comparison.
The Tuskegee experiment largely impacted our health and ethics department in the U.S. It caused major changes to be made around the ways we run medical experiments with human subjects. Even 53 years after the experiment on syphilis, Black men in Alabama and across the country still have a sense of mistrust towards our healthcare system. Even after a 3-year study, the research shows that 27% of Black men and 4% of white men tend to show less interest of being subjects in any medical research studies. The Tuskegee experiment was the study that changed many perspectives on how experiments involving human subjects were reviewed. This study changed the ethics and procedures which experiments with human participants were run and put many more laws into place to protect human subjects. In 1974, 2 years after the conclusion of the Tuskegee experiment, the National Research Act was signed and put into effect. This act was protected the participants of any studies or experiments involving human subjects. Since this law was put in act, researchers are required to receive informed consent from every subject included in the study. The study must be researched or funded by the Department of Health and Education and Welfare. It is also required that all human studies must be reviewed by the institutional review boards and all participants in the study are ethically fit. In October of 1995, President Bill Clinton made a National Bioethics Advisory run by the Department of Health and Human Services. This commission was made to review the current procedures, regulations, and policies.
After 40 years, the Tuskegee experiment came to light. On December 16, 1997, over 20 years after the study was revealed to the public, U.S. President Bill Clinton offered a long overdue apology for the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. At the time of the presidential apology, 6 of the original 600 participants of the study were alive, and only 5 attended.
The United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly, morally wrong. It was an outrage to our commitment to integrity and equality for all our citizens. To the survivors, to the wives and family members, the children and the grandchildren, I say what you know. No power on earth can give you back the lives lost, the pain suffered, the years of internal torment and anguish. What was done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
The Tuskegee syphilis study has had a lasting effect, not just on the subjects and their families, but on the entire medical community. This experiment will stand as a lasting reminder of injustice and racism in the medical field.